Hello, and you're listening to It Is All About Sports podcast. I'm Scott again this week, and this time we'll be talking about the greatest, or the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, Muhammad Ali. Or at least that's what he used to say about himself. Actually, I agree with that, but before we get into that, today is Tuesday, February 25th, and it's sunny and very cold up here. We're supposed to get some more snow tonight. But anyway, on to this week's show about Muhammad Ali. I'll have to admit, as a kid growing up in the 1970s, I did not like Muhammad Ali too much. You know, every time I saw him, he was always running his mouth and never seemed to stop. Ali was the first true trash talker that I can remember. In today's sports, talking is expected, but in those days, it did not go over too well. Back in the 1970s, they had this show on every week, it seemed like, and it was called Wild World of Sports, and some of you listening to this probably remember this show. It was really a great show. It had all kinds of sports on every week, downhill skiing, everything else you could think of. This is a great time to be a sports fan, and so is now, but I remember that as a kid growing up. I was always a fan, I was always a fan of boxing as a kid growing up. My brother and I used to have boxing gloves when we were kids. We used to duke it out. And he used to get the best of me because he was 4 years older than me. Once we caught up in size, then it was more even, and then it was me. But anyway, continuing on about Ali. Like I said, I was a boxing fan as a kid, and in those days, Wild World of Sports would show the heavyweight fights usually once a week. This was with the contenders would fight once a week, and then he would have the championship fight every once in a while, like maybe every 6 months or so, once a year, something like that. And it was not like it was today. Today you got to spend $50 or so for pay-per-view. Back then you could watch it right in your living room. And it wasn't until many years later I realized how great Ali was. I always rooted for him to lose, but when I grew up and watched his fights later again, like on Sports History Channel, I thought to myself he was the best that I ever saw, and most likely the best ever. Now you might say, well, what about Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Jack Johnson? They're some of the greatest heavyweights of all time, too, especially Rocky Marciano never lost a fight. However, Rocky Marciano was 5'10", 185 pounds. I'm not sure how he would have, matched up with the 6'2", 220-pound Ali, who was, lightning quick. Joe Louis had the Brown Bomber, had a great punch, no doubt about it. But still, with Ali's speed, and the same thing with Jack Johnson, I didn't see any of those guys fight actually, but I've researched them and read a lot about them. And Ali was the best I ever saw. And later we'll ask you who you think the best fighter you ever saw was. Anyway, first of all, he had fought some of the best contenders of his time. Joe Frazier 3 times. Smoking Joe was definitely he was definitely a great heavyweight champion in his own right. Then he had to contend with George Foreman, probably the most powerful heavyweight champ of all time. And then Ken Norton, who came out of really nowhere, but was really a good fighter, and he was really, really strong. Ali was the inventor of the rope-a-dope strategy, which basically went like this. He backed up against the ropes in early rounds, tried to absorb as much of his opponent's shots as possible while taunting him with that. Is that all you got? Well, I thought you could hit. Remember those days when he used to run his gob all the time? Then in the later rounds, with his opponents tired, he would go on the attack. And this is how he beat the much more powerful George Foreman in Rumble of the Jungle, and how he beat Frazier in the Thriller of Manila. Ali was the master of psychology. So this is why we think Muhammad Ali was simply the greatest fighter ever. The only man to win the heavyweight champion 3 times, even after some of his physical skills started to diminish, he still won fights with his strategy. Ali will probably be best remembered for his fights with Joe Frazier. The Thriller of Manila may have been one of the best fights in history of boxing. But my favorite though, even though it was not as good as the battles he had with Joe Frazier, was the win he had over George Foreman, who was much bigger and stronger than Ali at the time. And Ali was not in his prime, actually, at the time of this fight. Also, I want to put a little note out there. That Ali-Frazier first fight was awesome in its own right. We could have an article and story just about that, everything that built up to it. But anyway, back to what my favorite fight was, probably. Anyway, going into that fight, the fight against Foreman in Africa, George Foreman had knocked down Joe Frazier 6 times in his fight against Joe Frazier to win, in the first 2 rounds to win the heavyweight championship. And then after that, Foreman destroyed Ken Norton. So heading into the fight against Ali, nobody thought that Ali could actually beat him. And Ali had just come off a loss to Ken Norton, who broke his jaw. So, but it didn't quite turn out that way because Ali used his rope-a-dope strategy and he tired Big George out. And in the 8th round, he came off the ropes and knocked the big man out, which was surprising at the time. George had not even really been hurt till that point in the fight or his career. So Ali did the number on him. So this is why we think that Muhammad Ali, in his prime, we think was the best fighter ever and would have beaten any fighter in any era in their prime. Ali lost some years off his career, because he would not go overseas and fight in the Vietnam War, which more than likely he would have not have to fight anyways because he was a celebrity, being the heavyweight champion of the world. Ali instead stood behind his religious beliefs and lost his heavyweight championship, which he later regained by beating George Foreman. The 3rd time he won the heavyweight championship was a rematch with Leon Spinks, which Ali won by a decision. I remember both of those fights with Spinks. Ali used to say that he could float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and he sure could. His combination of speed and power would be too much, we think. And we also have to mention, we think he was probably the smartest fighter of all time as well, in terms of using the strategy to win fights, as we previously already mentioned. During Ali's time, being the heavyweight champ of the world was a big deal, and boxing was a major sport. Not like today. Today's boxing takes a backseat to MMA, and certainly the heavyweight division is nothing like it used to be. Great athletes just don't seem to want to get into boxing anymore. It's sad for the sport that I loved as a kid growing up. I missed watching the big guys duke it out. Who would be your favorite heavyweight of all time? Who do you think would be the best heavyweight of all time is what I should say. We think Ali was a bad man, like he said himself. So there you have it. And then also on today's Miami Herald, there was a picture of Ali. It was 50 years ago today that he beat Sonny Liston, I believe it was. And it's really something to remember, reflect back on the kind of career he had. Like I said, I did not really like him very much. I rooted for him to lose, but sometimes you don't appreciate people or teams, I guess you should say. Maybe just people, because I would probably still hate the Patriots forever. But people like that until they're no longer boxing or their time has passed, and especially with boxing because it's pretty much a dead sport these days. I mean, we talk mostly about what's his name? I can't even think of his name. The lightweight guy, Mayweather. Yeah. But to me, I don't like that style. I mean, I like the middleweights when Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler and those guys. I'll probably do something about them too because I really enjoyed their fights, especially the fight that Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard had as well. But the heavyweight division for me was a lot. Back in those days, they had some guys that just would really just drop down and just knock the shit right out of you. I mean, they would have knockdown fights like it was nothing. Not like today. But anyway, so I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to see what you think, who your favorite heavyweight champ of all time is, and tell me what you think. You think I'm right? You think I'm wrong? Just let us know. We'll have a couple of podcasts coming up this week. We're going to be taking a look back at the 2003 Marlins. If I'm correct on that, it's the 2003 Florida Marlins who won the World Series. Or maybe it's 2004. It's either 2003 or 2004. But we're going to look at that team, discuss that a little bit about how, it's been a long time since, Florida had any kind of championship other than the Heat, but I'm not a real great big Heat fan. But it's nice to see somebody winning some championships here in Florida. But anyway, that's what we'll be talking about. We'll also have a little show at the end of the week, hopefully with some guests on with wrapping up the week as far as the Lightning and the Heat goes, a little NASCAR, and then also talking about University of Florida basketball. So we got a lot to talk about at the end of the week. So we hope you join us. But we'll also be doing something probably this week too about, like I said, the 2003 Florida Marlins, the team that beat the Yankees 4-2. The last time the Florida Marlins won the World Series. So until then, I'm out. Why don't you leave a comment below? Let me know what you're thinking. Check out our YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to everybody out there on Spreaker, Stumbler, YouTube, Facebook, or wherever. Thanks for listening. All right, I'm out. See you next time. This is Scott from It Is All About Sports.